Yes.
One second.
All right, so we're ready.
I'm gonna run out and get some stuff I just printed off. Be right back.
Okay. All right. I won't say anything important until you get back, Doug. Okay. So welcome to the August 17th meeting of Finance and Facilities. We are getting late start because of technical difficulties, and we'll probably be working some of those out as we go. So on our agenda, we have some new business items, and then we have some overviews, and we'll talk about each one of those as we go through. So to start us off, Pete, do you want to talk about Finance and Facilities committee responsibilities and give us some overviews of things that we need to be taking account of?
Sure. A couple of things that, the Finance Committee, the role is, one is the Finance Committee acts as one of our controls in our purchasing and in our accounting procedures. So as part of that responsibility, we issue warrants generally every 2 weeks for payables, and then payroll is on the opposite week. And part of that process is for the warrants to be reviewed by me, by the superintendent, and by the Finance Committee, not always to check exactly what we're spending money on, but just to kind of be those extra set of eyes to see if something looks strange, if to ask questions and to question things that you don't understand. After a while, you'll see a lot of recurring type payables, but there are some new ones occasionally, and that extra set of eyes always helps all of us to make sure that we're spending things right. If to me, questions always help me in my future presentations to know what people are looking at. If you ever want more detail, that can easily be done. If you are looking for certain types of reports, that can be done. I think I look at making sure we don't pay multiple vendors out of a single address. That's, to me, that's fraudulent. We look for different paychecks being written to the same person in the same pay period, or again, same address to different people in a pay run is the signs that I look for. But part of that is just we need the Finance Committee members to come into central office and get the stack of warrants and review them, and do it either with me or ask me questions afterward. The other thing is the Finance Committee is part of the purchasing beforehand too, in terms of procurement.
Actually, let me interrupt for 2 seconds because I have one more thing I wanted to say about that. And also, Dave, did you hear any of that?
Yeah, I had a question on it.
Okay.
Do you want us to come into the office once a month and review warrants?
That was the question I was going to ask. Pete, you said there's a good schedule of when you guys are going to be having warrant packets out.
They go out every week.
Okay. So, well, you mentioned something about every Friday or something that you were doing payroll on a certain basis.
So payroll is basically executed on Thursday night for Friday paychecks. And we do the same thing for accounts payable. We process the accounts payable. Generally, the checks are printed and the ACH is run on Thursday night for Friday dating. So there's always something going on in the office.
But Friday is a good time for the board to come in, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter. Early because it's probably even better, because then John and I have really had a chance to look at it.
So,
okay.
We keep.
So we review what you've done. So we review what you've done on the warrants.
Yes.
And at what point in time, what is our role on that? Then we look at it and just agree with you, or?
As a control, I mean, you're there to ask questions. Not there to decide what to pay, but it's just to look for abnormalities. It's a control as opposed to a piece of the process beforehand.
So some of the questions that I asked when I was new I asked about just about everything. But sometimes, for instance, I'll notice at particular times of the year when we pay staff stipends, they actually do show up on payroll twice. So that's a question I've asked, is why are we paying these people twice? Sometimes I'll ask, I know Gerald has asked in the past too, about particularly large purchases, just to say, hey, why did we write a check for $50,000 to this person or something like that? And then once our other responsibility is to sign the warrants, so that we have to have 2 signatures out of the 3-member committee that simply says we've had 2 people look over this and are okay with it.
Was that waived during the pandemic? Because I know we couldn't get in there for months, but
We did waive that during the pandemic, but
it was.
again, yes.
Yeah.
And Pete, usually keep the warrants in your office, or do you keep them in the finance office?
They're kept in the business office with Gail generally, but we could certainly set up a place that can limit our contact with each other if that's an issue, at least these days.
I was just thinking,
I'm thinking
if you're not
health-wise.
there.
I'm thinking health-wise, not.
I think having them in the business office is fine. And then if we feel like we need to move them because of health concerns, we can do that. Okay.
Wait, so we, as 2 people of the school board, can approve a warrant?
Well, we're not approving anything. We're simply signifying that we are aware of the charge, because the budget is what approves the item. So this is just to make sure that, it's a double check on fraud and probably fraud or like mistakes or things like that.
Okay, I thought, okay.
All right. So basically one of the things I do want to make sure is we don't get those real piles of warrants. So I'll keep an eye out and let people know if we really need to come in and take a stab at them. Until then, I'll just assume that people can drop by at your convenience. And if it's not a problem, we don't need to schedule it more. Doug, you all good?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to procurements then.
So the other thing that the finance committee is and the board in general is responsible for is in statute, at least, bidding out our property and casualty insurance every 5 years. So that's a process of putting together an RFP for certain insurance companies, sending that out and getting the bids back, and then awarding that at least at a minimum every 5 years. We don't have to sign a 5-year contract, but we have to go through the process at least every 5 years. And this is that year. So we will be going to bid. We've sent a protective cancellation prior to the beginning of this year to our current insurer, and then we're putting together the RFP now with the attorneys to send that out, and we'll send that out to. I get a list of insurance carriers from the state website. They have a list, and we also get occasionally we'll get some that have send letters of interest, and we'll put those together.
Okay, and what is our role in that process?
It will be reviewing it, reviewing the RFP, reviewing the and when the bids come in, to kind of go through it. They're very different, and just analyzing that, and it's we went very safe last time because everything else was new around here and everything else was changing. So we kept our current insurer, which is MSMA, which is the Maine State MSMA, Maine School Management Association, which also oversees the boards and the superintendents.
Okay, Dave, any questions on that?
It's going to be interesting.
All right, Doug, anything?
Now, the only question I have is, do we have, I mean, in my view, to be helpful to our staff and members of our community, education community, do we have like a representative of the company that works with you or works with the staff that comes sees them face to face and helps them? Or is this just something that is just a big one over the world type thing and they just sign up?
This is property and casualty, not health.
Okay.
So this really is
I misunderstood. I thought it was.
this is insurance for our stuff
No.
and liability
Let
especially.
me ask you that question. Do we have a person for that?
We do. We have a whole group of MSMA that are there and incredibly responsive.
Okay.
Not that
I mean,
they
do they ever show up in person and speak to you, or is it all by video or phone, or?
No, never. I've never seen them in person in my office. I've seen them at the MSMA at the conferences. So if you go to the school board conference, you can meet them all. They sit at the table when you first walk in.
Yep.
I can give you
I
names.
just didn't know what level of service we get.
It's very high.
And that could
Not
be
that-
something in the RFQ as well, as like, what kind of service do we want?
You know, but this can be done. I mean, so this process. So this is the one that's in statute. This process can be done, you know, on a smaller scale. We can do it with snowplow bids, and you know, the idea is that the bids would go out and the finance committee would kind of review them before we actually accepted it. We haven't really had a lot of, you know, takers for that, but and the bids and the RFPs are very simple. But we do have the board or the finance committee kind of review those. We have in the past. And then award that through the usually the school board actually awards the bid eventually.
All right.
There are others that will be coming up, and that's part of the whole policy, the DJ policy that we went through. You know, there are a lot of other big purchases coming up that will meet the threshold of the review of the finance committee and the board in general that we just want to be aware of. And, you know, we're working with the attorneys now to make sure that we are doing everything legally properly to award contracts with architects that will be necessary for the modular project, architect and engineer firm that will be necessary if we want to pursue the revolving renovation fund from the state, which is a 0% interest part of the amount awarded is reduced from the principal. So it's actually it's a sub 0% interest rate loan, but it will have to be bonded.
Pete, is that the thing the board put the other night, the 250 and below?
That was the procurement policy.
Yeah, I know, but is that like, you know, so like John can?
So you missed the end of that.
I did.
Meeting, but I wanted to acknowledge what your point, because most of the procurement, the policy DJ, except for the local piece, really refers to the process of procurement, which process should be followed for different types of purchases. What you're talking about is the award of the contract. So once the procurement is done, and we've looked to see what the results of that process were in terms of bids, and it doesn't have to be the lowest bid for an RFP, but I think what you were getting at was the intent of some kind of approval process, either at the superintendent level, the finance committee level, or the full school board level, depending on a dollar amount.
Yeah, the dollar amount.
That's not in the federal side of it. We've got some very low numbers on the local side, but I think that's kind of the, you know, when we do eventually talk about policy DJ, I think that's probably an area. I mean, we can't touch the procurement side of that, but I think the notification and or approval side of that is something we should talk about. And as well as really taking that same approach to the local, the non-mandatory side of it, because I think though that part of the policy, which we didn't change, was written in a confusing way. It was written in a way like it was written the way you read it, Doug, that all those numbers are thresholds for notification, not thresholds for which process to use. And so I think that's what eventually, that's why I think those numbers on the local side, on the non-federal side, are incredibly low and would probably require us to be meeting every couple of days, given this COVID federal grant money.
By the way, I apologize for having to leave the meeting, but I had to. I had another meeting at 8:30, so.
No, but that was a good point. I think that's the
problem,
point. That was it actually it stood out to me as something, a distinction that would needed to be made, and it helped me actually in reading the old policy.
Okay, so that's DJ, which we are going to come back to later. Is there any questions on, or Pete, did you want to talk more about the modular process? Or do we want to do that in a future meeting as it comes up?
That'll be a future meeting. I'm still waiting to hear back. We're trying to really, the first step is to get the architects hired, and we're working with the attorneys now and trying to figure out if we can award the architect and engineering side of this without going through a process, or must we go through a process of basically an interview process for RFQs, request for qualifications. And the reason why we're asking this question is because we have been working with WBRC in Portland and Bangor for the renovations of the middle school and high school for the last number of years. And they have all the information and the site plans and been involved with both code enforcement offices at Thompson and Rockland that would, we think, help us greatly in getting this done properly without reinventing the wheel. So we're waiting for that. Then the next step will be having construct the RFP for the 3 modular companies that we have that I know we'll send it to, and then we'll also post it. We generally post these in an Augusta newspaper, which is read by the construction industry. So it goes to the greater New England area for possible bids.
Are we purchasing the modulars?
That's the plan, yes.
Yeah. I've been involved in places where we leased them. That never seemed like a logical thing.
No, I think we're looking at these as a long-term structure. I know everybody goes into them saying they're only short-term, but we're looking at a long-term structure that will actually solve other problems that were not problems, other opportunities that we have. Opportunities I like. My dad always said, what are your successes and your opportunities?
What
So,
are we, again, this is from me being new, and I apologize. Are we having problems with too many students in buildings?
well, COVID forced us to space them out differently, but this was
That's
really
no longer the case.
it could be. We're still doing distancing, and it still could be a case. We're still encouraging a lot of as much outside use as we can. That's really something John and Stephanie could address that, but it is going to be an issue for quite a while to at least keep kids separate as much as we can. Having space for kind of for learning recovery will be helpful. Special eds always need space, but we are in the process in the next 16 months, we will be out of the Mclean school, the Mclean building, as administrative offices. And so again, because you missed all this, our original plan was to actually move the administrative offices into South School, where the school board meeting was held the other night. And then we would use the modulars to move some of our other services to allow us to do that. Because right now, if we didn't have any extra space, this South School space would probably be used for special ed, possibly the CDS program and other programs that we can't fit anywhere else.
Why are we moving out of the Mclean building?
It was a decision that was made many years ago, Doug. You want to address why were you a proponent of this, Doug? This is all Doug.
I'm not saying a word. I'm just listening.
I mean, this is longer ago than, there's nothing I can do about it. So
Yeah,
Right.
this has been an ongoing issue. A couple of years ago, though, the school board approved a move, and the city council accepted it. So accepted the building. So there have been some conversations recently about not, there have been conversations lately about that, but we recently, as a board, reaffirmed our commitment to giving Rockland the building,
Well, at some
which
point,
previous
John,
school
can you-
board had voted on.
Dave, just so you know, to be clear, Doug did not do that. Okay?
Doug was.
Doug did
was
not do
around
that,
then.
but I understand. I think one thing I will try to explain, Dave. I don't disagree. We have to spend this money. So it's not a question of where we spend it because we are being dictated to spend it. And so
Wait,
the
you
things
mean the
that,
ESSER money?
the COVID money.
Okay.
So we can't say this is how we want to spend this money per se. So John came up with a plan to use some of the modules. We are overcrowded in the middle school, and we are overcrowded in Thomas the Grammar School in certain classrooms. There's no question about it. And because and I don't remember what the correct term is, but because the technology staff, I guess there's John, correct me, whatever it is, but there's something in the middle school where it's convenient for them to set up shop. And so the idea long-term would be to turn these modules over to some of the staff, it's like technology, to be utilized long-term to solve a long-term problem.
Yeah.
And that's part of it.
There's a couple issues with the technology department. So the technology department is currently in the basement of the Mclean building. And the fire chief has come right out and told me that basically the only reason he's allowing them to continue occupancy down there is because he knows that we're moving out. He says technically it is not up to code, at least not to his satisfaction, to have that department and those individuals quartered down there. Number two, the connection to our internet is now in Thomason. So our internet goes back and forth now between Rockland to Thomason, and then back out, or Thomason to Rockland, and then back out to then back to Thomason, then back out to the district. So it's not efficient in terms of the speed and processing ability for our IT department. Three, because that old building is in the state that it is, and the IT department is in the basement, there's a significant concern that someday we're going to have flooding issues down there. And that's a real possibility. And we don't want that to happen and destroy our whole technology infrastructure for the district. So there's all kinds of reasons we want the IT department out of that space.
Okay, it's been it predates me by a long way, so.
All right.
You have to go back and review the original plans of the Schools of the Future plan, because we were.
You might want to explain what Schools of the Future is.
We were 10 buildings, or 11 buildings, 10 schools back when John and I started in 2014. We had a K2 school, a 3-5 school, a K4 school, K5 school. Do we have a K6 school? We had an 8-9 school, a 10, 11, 12 school. We were all over the place. And so from the structural sense, Schools of the Future reorganized that into a more traditional 4 K5 schools, 1 6-8 middle school, and 1 9-12 high school. And no administrative office. We would use one of the old schools. The old South School was going to be administration. We outgrew that plan quickly with special ed, with potential of putting our 4-year-old special ed, the community's 4-year-old special ed students, as well as having a place for our alt ed and our adult ed programs.
And our after school program.
And after school now.
All right. So anything else, Pete, that you want to say about procurement?
Nope.
Okay. And so any questions directly related to the insurance or any of the upcoming RFQ, RFPs? All right. So let's move on to meeting dates. And so I assume everybody got the information that Pete and Jen put together about meeting dates. And Dave, I know when we spoke recently, you mentioned that you might like to move the meeting earlier. I wanted to double check with you about that.
I would prefer, well, I can live with the meeting, for now, I can live with the meeting dates where they are.
Okay, and I think Lauren and Doug, if I'm correct, you guys cannot meet earlier. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's harder.
Okay. So in that case, let's keep everything the way we've outlined it, unless anything comes up and we need to reevaluate.
So we're going to do the 5 to 6:30 Tuesdays Tuesdays twice a month.
Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, thank you. I needed to mention that. So we're going to do once a month for August and September, and then we'll start twice a month in October. And the reason for that is Pete and I were talking about just making it easier on the facilities, because right now they have a lot going on. And so when we come in, we can actually be starting to work on, they'll have wrapped up those projects and we can start thinking a little bit more future oriented. So starting in October, we will be meeting twice a month, but until then, once a month. So.
Yeah, we want those directors to come to these meetings so we can, let the board know through the finance committee what's going on around the schools and start working on some of the other, and so they can also hear the board's desires for things like long-term plans, and so we're all kind of on the same page. And so it was hard to try to get their time right now because they're out straight trying to get the buildings ready.
And we'll also, we're going to start meeting quarterly with the nutrition director. So we'll have some updates on that more regularly. So.
And transportation, we'll do that too.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. We'll talk about that later. All right, everyone good? Let's move on to committee goals. And here I'm okay if we're kind of vague. Basically what I wanted to do, since we didn't do this in June because we were moving committee, I wanted to just make sure that we had an opportunity to say for committee members to contribute any goals. Doug, if there's anything that you particularly want to get done before you head out. And I know, Dave, since you're new, this is not a great time to be coming up with goals. So this is something that I intend to revisit on a regular basis. So if you don't have anything now and you come up with stuff, don't worry, it'll come back around.
I'll mention one thing.
Yeah.
It won't get done before I leave. Okay.
But you want to kickstart it.
Kickstart it, right? So I talked to John about this earlier in the year after graduation. I really want to fix, I call it Southfield, but Wasget Field. I want to do that. Molly left and she was getting some information, so I'm at square zero. But I do think that if you look at our high school and our facilities.
Actually, Doug, can I interrupt for a second? Can you just clarify what Wascott Field is for Dave and also for me, because I get them all mixed up still.
So Wasget Field is named after Dr. Wasget, who was a longtime physician in the district and did all the athletic physicals for the kids coming up back in the 60s and 70s. Okay, so they named the field after him. It was Southfield before that. And basically, in a nutshell, we've done it. We've upgraded a couple times. The last time it was upgraded for like lights and things were 1993. And then when Oceanside came along, we actually built prior to Oceanside, we actually started building the press box, and we don't have one on the other side as well or anything like that. And it has some issues. Like it has an elevator that never worked. It has a little bit of leakage up there. It has some other things, but as an overall complex, as I was talking to Molly about it, we could do an overall plan where I think it would be useful. The issue she and I struggled with, I shouldn't say she did. We talked about whether or not to put in a turf field, and she sort of convinced me it was a good idea, even though you have to remove it and change it every 8 years, but you don't have to do all the foundation work if it's done properly the first time. So I estimate that to be about $1.5 million because everything's going up. There's nothing question about that. So with interest rates being zero, I don't know who would want to do it, but I recommend that we look into it. And John wanted a plan for that, which I understand, but we can bond it. And I'm thinking that's what we should do. I mean, if we're spending this much money on all this other stuff, for $1.5 million, short-term bond, short-term being 5 to 10 years, I think that that's a reasonable thing to do to upgrade all the facilities, because you look at
Doug.
high schools, Lincoln Academy, Madomic, Camden, Belfast, they all have upgraded their stuff, every one of them. And
Doug, does that include the track?
that includes the track. But the track is going to be used more just for the community, Lauren, because literally the track team consists of 12 people. That's what Lauren told me. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone.
But
to
it may
Camden.
not in 20 years, or maybe 40 people in 20 years, right?
I mean, I've used the track in Camden to walk on, and myself. It's a beautiful track to walk on and do. Madomic does the same thing, and so it should be for our community as well.
Right.
I think.
Right.
I don't think it's just for the school.
Right.
But I do think that, I don't know how John felt. Probably he wasn't even thinking about it, but I was embarrassed to see the grass growing under his feet on the track.
Oh God, I saw it yesterday. I was like, oh my God, I
I mean,
forgot.
and then literally hasn't been a track meet on it in 50 years since the 70s.
Oh,
So I mean, we spend money on a lot of things. I would like to see that done. It won't be done right away. I wouldn't even expect to go for the voters until June of next year at the earliest. But that's in my free time, which I don't have any of. I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to work on, and maybe with the new athletic director, we'll have some time to do that as well. But that's
I think
kind
a
of-
bond is a good idea. That's a good idea,
I mean,
because
that's what I
the
like to see.
folks can vote like, yep, our high school and our community should have that, or nope,
Nope,
don't want to have
Not
it.
right. And we did some work on the fields. It's not like anything's been done, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done for irrigation. There's no irrigation there or anything like that. So again, you're swapping irrigation and maintenance for a turf field. So there's some definite benefits to that, because you can use 3 or 4 different, lacrosse, football, all levels. You can use soccer, you can use everything. So everybody can play on a turf field. So that's the beauty of it. And
It also makes our district modern. We're modernized in many places through Schools of Our Future, but this will make it look and feel like, wow, this district has it going on. And that's one of my personal goals, is that people look at us and say, wow, RSU 13 is amazing.
I mean, we got, we have a lot of expenses in Rockland, the taxes are through the roof, but I think that is something that we should look at, and any COVID money that we can use for lights, John, on one side of the field, let's use it. I mean, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. But in any event, that's the only thing really that I need to talk to you, John, sometime offline about a small thing, nothing big on this though.
Okay, so let's go. Dave, is there anything that you did want to throw on the table?
Well, the one thing I'd like to throw out on the table right now is I want to make sure that the maintenance on the buildings and facilities we have is being executed in a timely manner. So
Okay.
I don't know how well it's being done. I apologize if I'm stepping on something that's already been taken care of. I've noted in the past that it's something that's it tends to fall through the cracks a lot.
Right. Okay. So what we have then are 2 items, both are maintenance related. So what I'm going to recommend is, if this works with Pete and John, because I don't want to add extra staff time, if we can have like at least a high level discussion on the October meeting about this. And that way, Doug, you'll still be able to be part of that initial conversation, and then we can just see where we go from there. Does that work?
Hopefully I won't be in Quebec, so I'll give you a date when I'll be around.
You can zoom in. We're on Zoom anyway. What does it matter where you actually are?
Mozambique. Chelsea, can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
Everybody knows what my,
The windows,
yeah,
which is also a building maintenance.
right.
Is there anything else I forgot to ask you, Lauren?
No, and I think that I know that goes along with us as a district and what we are to the community, is when we finish the windows and the trim of the high school for very little money, it looks really modern, because we already have an amazing renovation we did. So it completes that flagship building from the outside anyway. And that with community gardens down the road, we'll have it going on. So,
John, do you have anything?
I do actually. So I appreciate that conversation. I really do. I was at the field yesterday for another reason, meeting about graduation over there, and I noted that the field house, that's what I'll call it. You call it a press box, I think, Doug, but I'll call it a field house. Needs work. The corner boards, a lot of those need to be replaced. It needs pointing up. I don't know what the condition in the top roof is. The front roof looks okay, the awning, but the field does need to be redone. The track is really not suitable. If we want a track over there, that would need to be redone. So I'm in agreement with you there, Doug, 100%. The lights need to be replaced. The only other big ticket item that I'll throw out there, at least for now, so we're having trim replacement done at South School. They're replacing all that old deteriorating pine trim with Azek, which is a man-made material, composite material, which won't rot, which doesn't need paint. And that's great. They're really addressing that. It's looking sharp. But the siding over there is going to need some attention. It really, actually, what it needs to be is it needs to be replaced. And that's going to be a big ticket item at some point when that's done. You're starting to get water intrusion where siding has deteriorated, where it comes up against trim, where it comes up against windows, and so on. I've actually got a lot of experience as a builder and a carpenter, and I can tell you that that's something that we're going to need to pay attention to and get done in future. So there's one more big ticket thing for our list. South School.
And so my understanding when we did the discussion, when we had the discussion on the 100, I don't remember what the final number was, but the $150,000 contingency for construction, that was included in that. So is that what you're talking about in terms of paying for it? Or is this, where are we on that?
I am not sure how far that contingency is going to go in that particular project. So we are addressing the trim, which was a priority because we had water intrusion and basically the trim was rotting.
Yeah, slashing is important.
So I doubt, maybe Pete will correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt sincerely that amount of money would cover the replacement of that siding.
No, so what we're doing now is, this is just background, is we're doing the trim replacement and we're tying as much as we can to COVID. So obviously rotten wood causes smells, it causes bad air. And so, under the guise of, and I think it's true, of air quality, that's how we're getting some of this stuff done. So we're not even looking at using that contingency right now, unless somehow this project gets, they say we can't do it and we'll have to, dip in and use it then. I think we're at $40,000 right now. But we've got other projects going on around under that same premise too, that we're trying to use, air quality. But I guess if we're done with that item, I'd like to kind of go back to the goal itself. I mean, these are a lot of items but I'm not quite sure. At some point, I think I'd like this to be rephrased as a goal, because under the list, we have, some schools are getting old, believe it or not. Some of these bonds that we've just finished paying, or in the last 5 years since I've been there, Cushing School is getting old. It needs work. It's a four classroom school with five classes in it. It's as Doug said, Thomas Grammar School is tight. We're trying to use as much as we can, but if we ever want to pursue pre-K in Thomaston and Cushing, we need to look at space there. South School, I think we're paying the last payment this year on it, so it's 20 years old. Was that true? Is that right? Could that be right?
Yeah, that could be right.
One of them is 20 years old. One of them we're finished paying.
We built the middle school in the 90s, so I'm trying to remember what year that was.
I'd say mid, because
maybe I'm thinking
it was done by the time
maybe this is Cushing that I'm thinking of. We're 20 years into it.
But the add-on addition to South School was like, I think 7 or 8 million, and that might have been part of it. That was after.
Maybe that's the one. But what I'm saying is that there are a lot of items, windows, not just the high school, we know that project, but windows in a lot of these other buildings could be done. And that's kind of where I think the goal, when we actually set the goal, the overarching goal about, kind of where David was going with was maintenance plans. We want to have the most up-to-date, or not up-to-date, maybe
Maintain.
We want to at least be at a very minimum, so we're not in the position that we were when John and I got here, that we spent $31 million just to kind of catch up on all these things. We bought furnaces for every single building, windows for a lot of buildings. We did a lot of things that because things were just left to go and just cut from the budget at the last minute, roof repairs, siding repairs, landscaping repairs, and we just got by and it caught up with everybody. And so that's where a lot of at least the physical part of the Schools of the Future plan, not the academic side, came from. So I think that what I suggest is at some point we take this list and kind of come up with a goal that the committee can then point to every time we say, does this project help that goal, get us closer to that goal.
Okay.
My comment there.
So what I'm hearing then in general is that this committee would like to focus for a little while on facilities. I also think that we need to be adding policies because the policy committee is doing some reviews. And as we learned in the audit, we do need to have a couple of policies in place. So I think the policy, if we focus on policy and building issues certainly that'll probably take us through a year, but I think we can just get going on that now. So what Pete and I can do is prepare some actual goal language for that. I'm going to suggest that we do it in terms of a CIP, a capital improvement plan, which I've been talking about for a few years now. But Pete and I can bring forward some committee goal language to the next agenda meeting or the next meeting, and we can formally adopt that so that we have that touchstone to keep coming back to and focus our attention on. Okay, is anyone want to say anything else about that?
I would just suggest that we look at our F policies for facilities.
Yeah.
We kind of left that. Yeah, and it appears that we don't have any.
Oh, that would be why we didn't.
So there are 5 under the MSMA list table of contents. So we can certainly start with there. The first one is facilities development goals, priority objectives. So maybe there's a policy there that's in the making.
All right. So that's actually going to segue us really nicely into the policy review. So let me just double check. Nothing else explicitly on committee goals. All right. So moving on to policy review. Pete and I were thinking about this as being mostly kind of high level. There are some time sensitive policies. And then we need to go through sort of all of the policies kind of systematically. So if you didn't have a chance to look at all the policies, that's okay. What we need to do is sort of figure out what we want, recommendations that we want to make to the policy committee for DG and DJH, because those are ones that they're bringing forward to our next meeting. And then we'll need to think a little bit about our larger policies. So I'll ask some questions about that when we get there. Pete, did you want to talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, I think it's just good practice to go through and even if there's no changes, to acknowledge that the policy was reviewed at a certain date, because some of these have been 12 years old. They're 12 years since the last time they were really memorialized under the adoption. So I think a lot of these need to be looked at. I mean, there were some ones that just don't even.
Before you go on, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing.
Yep.
So this is under Section D of the School Board Governance and Operations.
Yeah, the D policies would be under that.
Okay.
And Pete, and actually Jen sent out an email with the D policies pulled out and also the MS whatever the acronym for the School Board Association is, they're model policies. And I made a list. Most of our policies we've adopted from those, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, unless I missed one. There are 8 policies that we don't even have. So there's some conversations that we'll need to have around whether we want to make a recommendation to the policy committee to bring those in.
Right. And some of those policies, when you're looking at the MSMA policies, look at the reference at the end of it, because some of those are really just statute.
Yeah.
Is why we wouldn't want to adopt them, because as statutes change, we still follow statute. But if there is a policy that you think the board might want to consider tightening its control, we can't undo statute, but we can certainly modify it a little bit to fit the needs of the district of this RSU. But there are some that were just, there was one I noticed that the actually DJH at some point in 2016 or so was first put on the books. It actually looks like it replaced DJF. DJF should actually be rescinded completely, because it looks like it's a complete duplication of DJH, of the old DJH. But that was just, things that I noticed. And
Yeah, so that's just cleanup too.
again, this process, it really is just cleanup anyway.
But I do think it's worth us actually, I think over the next few meetings, we'll be bringing forward some set policies so we can actually formally review them and send them to the committee. Because even if we just need to look at them more carefully.
Some don't apply to this. We don't hold investments.
I was wondering about that one. Yeah.
We don't.
Apparently it's best practice to hold investments though, or something like that.
We have, the finance committee has addressed this in terms of how we allocate assets in our scholarship funds and our fiduciary funds, but not, we've never had to. Cash flow has always been not allowed us to invest.
Okay. So Pete, when you and I talked last week, we were wondering if there was any low-hanging fruit. I think the low-hanging fruit would be great if we could shift that until the September meeting, unless you have any objections to that, just so that everyone has it in front of them and has a chance to review it. Does that work? Okay. So now we should be looking at DJ and DJH. So this is where that conversation, Doug, that you were mentioning earlier came in. Basically, my understanding is that the policy committee is meeting the 25th, and they're going to the lawyers from Drummond Wilson are going to be joining that meeting. Pete tried to get them to come to this meeting, but they were not able to schedule that. So they'll be coming to the policy meeting to answer questions from a legal perspective and give legal advice. So what our goal is, what recommendations do we want to send from this committee to the policy committee to consider including or excluding from the policy?
Well, without reading anything, I would, it's pretty tough to make any comment.
What do you mean without reading anything?
Well, I mean, I haven't read these policies.
Oh, these are the ones that we talked about in the meeting and Jen sent over in the email.
Which email did she send them in?
And then the email with the agenda. Although she sent all of them.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I have a draft agenda, and on the draft agenda, it actually outlines that we should have prepared for those, but it doesn't say that on the main agenda. So that's our miscommunication. So yeah.
I didn't see policies in the agenda
Sorry about that. We will make sure that we are more clear so we're prepared. So in that case, okay, so let's do this. Doug, you have a specific change that you want to make to this DJ policy.
No, I just want to look through it and see if it makes sense. You know what I mean? I mean, I know, for example, the one below it, the tax shelter annuity one, I'd have a lot of comments about that. Pete and I talked about that 3 years ago, but I don't know what the policy actually is. I know what we're doing in our district, and I don't agree with any of it. So it's a question of, how to make things better for me and for our staff and for our employees. But I mean, I haven't looked at a policy at all in 3 years.
Okay.
I don't know.
So is there any reason for policy to bring this, to do DJA in their August meeting versus their September meeting? DJ and DJH?
No, I think as I've talking to John today, they have another policy that's got to kind of bump this one back a little bit.
Okay.
I think that's what we'll address first. John and I can talk off camera at some point about scheduling this, but if it still makes sense to have policy at least review this on the 25th, we could all still join the meeting when this policy comes up, and we could still have Director Woodson explain at least what the rationale is besides some of this. Again, DJH, all we did was to make sure that school board members were part of the code of conduct. DJ is more complicated, especially when you get to section 2, because section 2 is basically the old RSU 13 DJ policy. And that's where it's overly complex.
I agree. I still haven't figured out what it says.
Yeah,
and I've read it 10 times.
It really restricts, when the board is, given the authority for the administration to spend the budget, this restricts it even more so. And it doesn't outline the procurement process. It outlines where they think the board should get involved. And I don't disagree with that. I just think that we just need to look at it through a different lens than it was written.
So basically where we are with DJ is that we really need a few things. We need sort of the high level question of what do we want this policy to accomplish? We need to understand from the lawyer what we absolutely need to protect the organization. And I'm not sure what Doug was talking about with the tax and annuity, because I don't see tax annuity. So am I missing that, Doug? Or is that a separate policy? Or is that one we need?
Different policy that doesn't apply to us.
Okay, so that's one that we'll get to then as we go through things. Okay. Okay, so we need those two things. So why don't I since we weren't able to get the lawyer here today, why don't I let Pete and John, you guys figure that out and let us know what schedule works for the lawyer. So if anyone's interested in that policy, we may want to show up at the policy committee meeting, but we'll leave that TBA or TBD. Does that work for everyone? Doug, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, if I just had, a copy of each policy, I can read it myself and make my comments.
Okay.
They're in the email I just sent you.
Okay, so definitely do that, Doug, for our next meeting. So we will make sure that when we list the policy review, we list the policy numbers. And I apologize, I missed that because I had the draft agenda. Lauren, John, anything you guys want to add?
I think, first of all, I think those policies definitely need to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be a good idea for board members to have some time to read the policies themselves, and then that way they can make good comments and ask good questions from the attorneys. So, what we don't want to do is go back and forth and have the attorneys come back 2 or 3 times. So it would be better to be prepped ahead of time instead of kind of show up cold at the meeting, in my opinion.
And you're talking about the policy committee meeting.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. So anything else, Pete, that you want to say about policies at this moment?
No, but just I'll see if I can gather, or actually I'll gather the MSMA F policies for facilities. And we can start adopting some of those, or seeing if they should be adopted.
Okay. So what Pete and I can do when we plan meetings is we can actually just go through and bring forward particular policies. And I can talk to Mark as well to make sure it lines up with theirs. So John will probably pull you into that conversation. Okay.
And this is actually on both Chelsea's on my list of things to do this year for the committee, just to begin the review. And I'm sorry that I just wrote D series finance, and I should have, and we'll just start,
didn't catch
we'll
it,
just do one or two at a time and just kind of get through the year.
Okay. All right. So Pete, you have 17 minutes to do a high level of fiscal 21, but I want to say something before you start. So normally, when Jen sent out the fiscal year information, we decided intentionally just to do the summary. In future months, we're going to be doing the article on that 56 page that tells you exactly what's been spent and so forth. But we wanted to do it just high level this month because we have a couple of other things on our plates. So starting next month, we'll have the high level 56 pages, which we're not going to go over every meeting, but we'll just have like 10 minutes that if people have questions on a particular article, we'll have an article, like we're going to focus on Article 1, or if you have big questions like, wait, we spent $100,000 and why did we do that? So we'll keep the conversation fairly high level for the meeting and also limited to a certain amount of time so that we are doing that work of actually going through year-to-date numbers, but we're also not spending our entire meeting going through year-to-date numbers. So
what I will do is, once this is public information, I will post it to the committee the committee webpage. And so where the agenda is will become minutes, and where the minutes, under the minutes, will become the financials that we review or any other information that the public should have available to look at, especially as we get towards budget season.
And when does that become public information? Is that when, because we had talked about actually putting it on the board agenda to formally recognize that we've looked at it. Is that when that process would happen, or after we've reviewed it here?
But we will review it, and then we're just, there might be a motion after the facilities report to accept the financials as presented.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's when it would become public.
Right.
Okay.
And
All right.
it just forces the high level review every board meeting every month.
Okay. So the floor is yours. And I will say, so this again is the information that we're using. Jen sent out in her email.
So I think as the finance committee was aware the entire year, we were trending towards underspending our budget, and not because we're super smart, but because we really didn't. There were a lot of things that we couldn't do this past year that we had budgeted for, and that we knew that we would start doing it again once COVID ended, which we had hoped was for this year, and now it looks like it will, but maybe with some restrictions, but I think we'll be more normal than we were last year. So a lot of this is just represents programs that we weren't able to fulfill the goals of the RSU.
Pete, can you just give a high level, because Dave wasn't able to access that document. So just
Which document is this?
yeah, so this is the fiscal year 21 by article summary.
Okay.
So in fiscal 21, we had just over a $32 million budget.
Yeah.
We spent just over 30.5 million. So we underspent our budget in most areas by a total of $1.5 million. We had some excess revenue from state subsidy that came in from tuition agreements that we get reimbursed for, not for state, for subsidy for tuition students that come into us after the fact. That came in over, we budgeted. Actually, we don't budget for it because it's never guaranteed. So our total net revenue over expenditures for the year is coming in around $1.75 million. The budgetary fund balance at the end of fiscal 20 was negative 1.25 million. So we'll be about $500,000 positive in our budgetary balance because we also carry our summer salaries, which we can go through at some other meeting, kind of explain what that is. Our gap balance will be improved from its current level of minus 4 million to minus 2.2 million. So
This is the articles by summary?
correct.
Okay. And that's the one, okay, I had a question on the first, I did get this, I just, I've recovered my computer. I haven't gotten back to the checking of I think I lost the email for the video. I had a question, it says percent increase and in parentheses, decrease on that.
It's
Does it
actually-
really mean that 110% is above and 195% is below?
Yeah, that's a bad column heading.
But yes, that is what it means.
But it's percent spent is what it should be.
Okay. Now, is our fiscal budget, is our fiscal year July 1st to June 30th?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a final budget, a final, the final year to year, the final year for.
This is
2021.
This is very close to where we're going to end up. I have some reconciliation to do, but this is mostly it. This is mostly reconciled.
Okay. I tried looking it over. I'm not real great with these things, so.
Well, come on in and we'll go over it. Because I think that it's going to be important that you understand, I'm not sure how you used to do it, but by article, and these cost centers are by statute, we can kind of go over what's in those at some point too.
Okay. I noticed the, what was it? The student support services was a little bit overspent.
And that's what you would expect considering the COVID, what we're dealing with social workers, and those are the areas that we actually didn't underspend. But we're still, some of that, we still may find some of that money going towards the COVID grant, but I think we're pretty close to having it all in the general fund.
Okay.
So why are we not using that for COVID? If
We are doing some. I just need to go through and just check to see which one we get through. Some of those. That's what I've got. This part of this process, just going through and just reconciling, checking all that.
Okay, so that's the final. That's the part that you'll do later.
That's what I'm finishing up. I'm 95% there.
Okay.
So, okay. So right at the moment, then we are 95% we only spent 95% of our money.
Correct.
So, that's now, does that go into a reserve account or to a, what's it called?
This goes into our undesignated fund balance.
That's, yeah.
Yep.
So that can go to projects for this year, or it can go to reducing the budget for next year, reducing the amount of money we have to raise for next year, right?
Those are some ways that a fund balance can be used. Because our fund balance was actually started out negative, this only gets us back positive.
Okay.
Again, that's a conversation I'm happy to have, either at a formally at a meeting, kind of go through the whole piece of it, or informally, just with you in my office, if you want to go through the history of where some of this came from, what happened in 2018, 2019 that caused some of this.
I need on history. I apologize.
Nope,
That's okay. I've been there.
That's a normal part of joining. Yeah.
But but it also reminded me that Chelsea and I talked when we were kind of talking about the year, is that we want to maybe dedicate a part of each meeting for education, and kind of go through and pick a topic and actually go through it and spend 15 minutes to learn about the local funding formula, what the articles mean, what actually goes into these articles. So I think that's a goal. That's a goal of ours. I think it's a goal of mine, to educate, and hopefully gain interest in the public, because the more we know, the more they know.
All right. Did Doug, Lauren, or John, did you guys have questions on the summary?
No.
I do not.
All right.
On a lighter side, do you think we'd use some COVID money to give Pete better lighting? He doesn't have to wave his hands all the time.
I think he just needs to turn that off. I mean, he was studied.
COVID money has got to be used for recycled material, saving money.
Okay.
And this is costing him money because he's turning the light back on.
Right. Yeah, so
Okay.
where we really underspent was just completely understandable given COVID, like buses, right? I mean, they're just like some classic lines that we underspent because, yep, that's a COVID year for you. So it's not at all surprising, and it's good work.
Remember, we froze the budget immediately upon passing
Yeah.
it also. We
Right.
we really questioned everything along the way. We knew it wasn't going to be a business as usual year. So this is the result of that.
Oh,
Right.
and how many, did we get a couple of buses through COVID
Yeah.
funding?
We got 4 buses, and from what I'm hearing, we need 4 more eventually.
You know, I think just
That's an
taxpayers
October
don't
conversation.
realize how well that COVID funding helped school district like ours in a bunch of ways, including that, you know, so.
And to Dave's earlier point, that's why we were on a plan to replace 2 buses a year. That kind of slowed down at 18 and 19, but we're trying to catch back up. That got us partly there, but I think like facilities need a plan, so does transportation, to make sure that we have buses that are always capable of getting our students to school.
And wait till we have to buy electric buses, by the way. That's definitely in our future.
You see the
Hey,
price
I
tag?
said we should have started that way. Dave has a question when we're ready.
We're running diesel buses at this point?
We've just switched over to gas, back over to gas.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gasoline or gas or propane?
Gasoline.
Okay.
There were the diesel were giving us too much trouble. We had switched over to diesel. We was buying them. We actually mostly because of the universal parts that we were using them. It was easier. We also were able to become a warranty repair center. Our mechanic is outstanding, but after really going that route for a long, there were too many problems and too many buses were off line for too long. So we've just bought 4 new gas ones. Nobody's comfortable in the transportation department with LP yet. We don't have natural gas up here to the degree we need it to make some of that work.
And the technology is really not there for electric. So
Not for our routes.
Not yet.
Maybe a couple in town.
The again, and my apologies for raising this. The last place I was at went to propane. They had one big disadvantage. They were too quiet. We had tongue-in-cheek complaints from parents who said they couldn't hear them coming far enough away to get their kids out the door.
that is definitely not a problem here. Let me tell you, 750.
Yeah. The dog ate my homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
All right, Pete, you want to move on to nutrition? Because it sounds like we don't have anything. Or Lauren sorry, did I cut you off for anything? No. Okay. So Pete, you want to move on to nutrition?
Yep, nutrition was also in the positive. We were overall revenue over expenses by about $115,000. That includes the $300,000 subsidy that this district pays into the nutrition program. So without that, we were still $185,000 in the hole. But the program itself that we were operating under, the summer food program, reimbursed us at a higher level than the traditional nutrition program, which was good. The problem was the participation rate was so low. It was really even still tough to get past our fixed cost of labor to prepare those meals and to just staff the different buildings and make sure that the kids were getting the food. We also were operating more lunch periods, more lunch rooms were being operated. Libraries were becoming lunch rooms to keep kids separate. But all in all, it was a less bad year for nutrition in terms of finances. But we fed a lot of kids, and last summer we fed a lot of families. We worked with partnerships in the community to make sure that anybody who wanted food could have food. So I think that.
Hey, what are adult lunches? Are those for our staff, or is that for the community, or what is that?
That's staff. That's when staff buys lunches. Those are the numbers that I want to see go up.
What's the status of the state paying our lunches now coming up?
This program will continue through the year, so it's free lunches for students again for this fiscal year.
No, the
Not
state
into the
law that they
future.
just passed. They just passed a state law that said everybody gets free lunches or something. There were
Right.
newspaper articles about it that didn't tell you anything about the finances.
They don't like those fiscal notes.
So in
But-
other words, we have to give free lunches, but they haven't funded it yet.
Well, I think they're funding it through the federal program the way we've been fed, the way we've been funded. The state's not funding it themselves, as far as I understand, but they are using the summer food program because that waiver has been approved at the state level by the feds. And that reimbursement rate actually covers the cost of food more so than the traditional federal food program does. So in that sense, it's paid for, the food's paid for, and even part of the labor is paid for.
And then that's a permanent change or a temporary change?
That's, as far as I know, the federal piece of it is temporary. The statute piece of it could be something to look forward to in future budgets to see what that might actually cost us.
So did we talk to our state reps at all about including a piece that actually doesn't put the burden on the local taxpayers?
I'll research the statute because there should be a fiscal note attached to it. I want to see.
There has to be. If it impacts state finance, there has to be a fiscal note. So
Right.
it has to tell.
But it might,
has
yeah,
to tell the
'cause
world.
if it's local, because I'm curious about what the local impact of it is. Dave,
Yeah, I thought it was just they're paying all kids lunches into the future. That's what I
That's
got
what I
out of the headlines, right? So
Except
so
for there's
if
no
that's
free
not
lunch
true,
except
we
for
need to
the
push
state
back
aid.
on it. What'd you say, Doug?
Except for there's no free lunch except for in the state of Maine.
Yeah. I will say that if they're not doing that, we should potentially consider actually doing some lobbying, because again, we're seeing this over and over again where they're doing some really great programs, but we're paying for it on a local level. And I think we need to have that conversation. Dave, go ahead.
But does our food, first of all, are we doing lunches in-house? I mean, do we employ the people doing the lunch program?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we don't outsource it.
Nope.
Now, is our lunch program running a deficit? Is it running at even or what?
It runs a deficit.
About how much?
Generally, the district contributes $300,000 a year out of $1 million.
So we're 30% deficit,
Correct.
and that would be the same with the updated federal this updated program from the state.
No, this past year we ran a 15% deficit.
Less people eating food.
No, more federal funding.
For federal funding, we actually, in this model, in the old model, because the reimbursement rate was less than the cost of food itself, the more we served, the more we had to subsidize.
Okay.
This model, at least the reimbursement rate covers the cost of food and part of the cost of labor. So each additional meal actually contributes, reduces the amount that this local budget has to absorb. And the model also allows us not to have cash registers running in every single school, which allows us to make sure the staff that we are employing is actually working on food, not money. So
You ought to be able to reduce staffing, and then if you have less work to do.
that's the plan. But at some point, you need a certain number of staff per meal served. So we're bumping into issue in some of our schools with, we could maybe get by with one, but we're on a busy day, one's not enough. So we're kind of between that 1 and 2, and it's because our, at the school level, our programs are pretty small. So I think that's our labor costs are going to be a problem for a long time. But the longer, but your point is absolutely correct. The longer that we can plan on a program that's like this, that may be free to the students, we could actually retire those positions that are mainly dealing with money and checking students and staff out, and put the money, the food money, the labor money towards actually, cooking and serving.
Out of curiosity, how many kitchens do we have? Do we have do we cook at one school and go to the smaller schools, or do you cook at?
We operate 4 kitchens out of the 6 schools.
And that was
Okay.
a change because it was more cost effective, right? I can't remember now.
We actually used to use 1 kitchen for 7 schools. And that was just getting cold food to schools way too late. So we've actually increased the number of kitchens that we're operating, and we've renovated 2 of the big ones. We actually have 3 brand new kitchens. So the high school has its own kitchen. The middle school kitchen was expanded, and that serves both the Cushing School and then the Thomason Grammar School, which is right next door. And then South School covers that building, which is a big building, and then Ash Point has its own kitchen.
I have a question and 2 comments.
So you have 5 kitchens? Oh, 4. 4.
Four.
My math brain is on sleeping.
But if you're on Zoom, you can look at the thing down below. It gives you 2 + 2 is 4. Like, since you can't see it, I'll let you slide this time.
I once ran
It's
a
on the
proof
phone.
in college that proved that 0 = 1.
All right, Doug, you had a question and 2 comments.
Yeah, it's just a couple comments and maybe a partial question, really. Number one of my concerns, and it's nothing I can do about it or anybody here talking tonight, is the fact that everything's free. And that's a comment from Doug, but I mean, the expectation now is once you give everybody free lunch, that they deserve it. Okay, that's what it boils down to. So irregardless of income or anything else, this is what we're doing, and this is where our country is going. So the only comment I would say about that is, if we ever go back to where we have to pay, we're going to run into some issues, because the parents are, for lack of a better time, desensitized, and they're in the mode, well, we go to school, we don't have to pay, we pay it through our taxes. So that's a negative, I feel. The second thing is, you mentioned about the adults, so I assume that any member of our staff could eat free, I assume, which is a benefit that we give. No, it's not a benefit.
No, they pay.
They pay, okay. But I do know that when my wife was a teacher, one of the big problems that she had was the fact, in the 20 minutes that she had to get her kids down to lunch and get them back to lunch and everything else, she never had time to eat herself. And so, she was answering emails or questions or phone calls or whatever the case may be. And I think it's pretty typical for most elementary school teachers. I wouldn't say that's the case for middle school and high school, but I mean, they don't even have time to socialize amongst themselves for 5 minutes. So from my perspective, I can understand why those numbers aren't higher, Pete, just based on what you put in there. Okay, they don't even have time to do it. So unless we start delivering, but John, being an educator, he could probably comment about this a little bit better, but I mean, that's what I got out of that, John.
I guess, I'm not sure what your basic
So
question.
he said the numbers were short, like on the adult. I mean, it says right here, it says adult lunches, he'd like to see those boosted up. They weren't very high for the last period. Based on this sheet of nutrition he gave us.
Yeah. I don't think we can measure anything by the numbers from this last year.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously it's like,
I think it would be all over the road. I mean, as far as staff having time for lunch. I mean, our staff has a clause in their contract where they don't have any duties, which is unusual. Most school districts assign duties to staff. We don't, because of their collective bargaining agreement. So if anything, theoretically, and I know theory is great, but theoretically, they should have more time than most school staff to have lunch, but I don't really think that's the case in actuality. But I don't think this last year's numbers are typical of anything.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just know that the elementary school teachers don't have any time.
Well, I'll backtrack my comment. My comment was more in the sense that if our food that we serve is more attractive, more people will want to buy it.
Okay.
That's where
That is true.
That's where we've been trying to go with this food service, is if that's one of the tests. If we see the teachers, the adults buying it, hopefully the kids are benefiting from that extra amount. I have an update on the bill. The bill actually, this bill requires the state to pay the difference between the federal requirement for a free breakfast or lunch and the full price for a breakfast or lunch at no cost to the students who are ineligible for free or reduced price school meals. There is no fiscal impact in this year, but beginning in fiscal 23, there is a $34 million cost to the state for this program. So it does actually have money earmarked to compensate food service programs. About what they say, they estimate that the cost of a meal is $2.85.
And what is our cost for food and what is our cost for food with staffing?
We are probably close to that. Food for the food itself is probably, I think, I can't remember, it's $4 all in or $5 all in. I've got to go back to and figure out where I got those numbers, but it's this is still a little bit less than this is that's a federal number. So this is under, the more we serve, the more we have to pay. It's still going to cost us.
So can we expect, and this is probably a better question for when we talk about nutrition, but just sort of in general, high level, can we expect the numbers that we had this past year where we did have that federal subsidy? Can we expect that number to continue? So like we'll be at 15%.
I think this program will be similar to last year's program. Hopefully improving participation, which should improve the overall financials for the year.
Okay. And Dave, I just hung up on you. I hope that was okay. All right. Okay. So that's not as good as it could be, but at least it's better than it has been.
Correct.
Okay. Any last minute questions about nutrition? We are about 10 minutes over the time that we were hoping to spend, although we also started 15 minutes late. Any other questions, nutrition? All right.
Dave, we can't hear you, David. You're still muted, Dave.
But we'll make this a priority this year to get Darcy in here to kind of learn more about the program.
Hello.
Answer your questions.
That
Hey,
should
Dave.
work.
Now we can hear you. Yep.
So Dave, did you have another question about nutrition?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Pete, was there anything in the other? I know we should talk about ESSER funds, but that also might be a longer conversation that we want to have next meeting.
That's a longer conversation.
I have a question for John. So John, not tonight, obviously, but are we going to get an update on St. George at some point?
Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. It's in a legal process, so yes, you will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Doug, thanks for asking that question, because I was going to ask that too. Yeah.
What's St. George?
Oh man, that's a long
That's a longer
story.
conversation.
Yeah, we don't have till Thursday, so we'll fill you in later.
All right.
Short version is it's money that's owed to us.
Right.
Good luck. I have a feeling that's going to take the courts.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So is there anything else that people want to talk about? Just a note that on the agenda, there are some future agenda items. So these will be things that are coming up over the next few months. And of course, we'll make sure that what we talked about today gets on the agendas as well.
The only thing I wanted to mention to the committee and John and Lauren, I may not be able to make the meeting on Thursday, or if I do make it, I'll be late. So just want to let you know that.
Yeah,
I
and
can be
it's
late.
by Zoom. It's by Zoom. You guys know that, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, we changed it to Zoom because of a little bit of a COVID concern, but also this construction, the South School, hard to get in the building actually. So
Okay.
combination, we're going
Well, then maybe
virtual.
I can
Thank God we
do that
passed the
throughout the day.
policy.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Is there a way we could actually move, because we've been doing executive sessions after the meeting, or at least after 6:30. Is there a way we could do that? Just because 6, I wasn't expecting it at 6.
Yeah, okay.
And if Doug's also going to be late.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
6:30 meeting then?
No, we'll start at 6, but we'll just change the order in the meeting.
Yeah, just put
Oh,
it.
so we'll miss the boring stuff. Like the consent agenda and the pledge.
Yeah, it's right. It won't take too long, but yeah. Mhm.
All right, thank you. That'll help.
Remember, the reason why it's at 6 is because the board meetings, the first of the month is always 6:30. The workshops were always at 6 to have dinner.
Yeah, can we make that consistent? Because I get mixed up with it.
We
That's
can
it.
make it consistent at 6:30. Yes, we'll make it consistent at 6:30. My last patient goes until 6, so it's hard for me to. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, all right. And then I will be there as soon as possible. Okay, sounds good. Anything else finance related?
Nope,
All right.
this will be the same link every time, same password is my phone number at work. And next meeting, September 14th. You notice that?
No.
I made the
I don't know
passwords
who remembers.
easy. I've made the passwords easy now.
Excellent.
I'll get with you later, buddy.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everyone. We'll see you all Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye.